There's something about horror movies that divide people. Some people love them and some people hate them. In that way, it's like horror movies are on like a tightrope or something. They're constantly a notch or two away from being laughable or being the next good one. I'm Jack Fitzpatrick, and this is sort of a guide on what makes horror movies good. Keep in mind though that I'm not a filmmaker. I have strong opinions and views on movies. I watch a lot of them, but you know, I'm just some guy. So my first rule starts with the obvious. A horror movie, a good one, should be able to build to something. Keep the tone consistent and the suspense raising. Every good horror movie you watch doesn't start out with the batshit insane stuff. It builds to it. A good horror film has the responsibility to slow down. It should set up and pay off. The key to rule one is patience. The movie shouldn't blow it all on cheap jump scare after cheap jump scare. A good horror movie should be able to sacrifice being scary for a moment in order to really screw with its audience. The point of a horror movie is to put the audience in kind of an uncomfortable state, and it's the film's job to keep them there. So to slow it down, I guess my tip would be to spare your scares. A good example of a patient horror movie that builds the suspense and is creepy throughout is The Conjuring. Now, The Conjuring is one of my favorite movies of all time, so it was obviously going to come up sooner or later in one of my videos. The director James Wan, who I kind of love, uses everything that he can to make The Conjuring feel exactly how it's supposed to. From the music to the acting to the unique camera direction. The movie feels anything but cheap and anything but rushed. It feels genuine and kind of timeless. But most importantly, the movie starts off with small things. Yes, creepy things are happening, but the characters don't exactly believe anything is going on yet, and they must be convinced. To suspend our disbeliefs, it starts off with really small things. You know, maybe a picture frame moves a little bit, maybe something else. By the end of the movie though, there's a full-blown possession, there are people flying over the room and whatever. It builds to it. The Conjuring sets up a game called Hide and Clap, which is basically the same as hide and seek, but the seeker is wearing a blindfold and they can ask for 3 claps to try and find where the hiders are with the sound that they make. What the scene is really there for is to establish the characters and acquaint ourselves with the layout of the house as well as the game that they're playing. Later in the movie, during the payoff, we know the general kind of feel of the house, we know where the rooms are a little bit, and we know how the game works. We know what is going on. However, because the movie is also doing its job keeping the suspense raising, we also don't know what to expect. And what follows is one of the best scenes of the movie.
Who's ever down there? I'm gonna lock you in now!
It may not be so obvious, but horror kind of plays along the same structure as comedies. It's all about patterns. To be effective in this, a movie should understand its rhythm. The offbeat and the unexpected are the keys to this exact thing. Think of one of your favorite moments in horror, or think of your favorite joke. The thing that gets us is what we're not expecting. A film should play with misdirection, patterns, and above all else, avoid the cliche. Expectation has a lot to do with this, and a movie should understand what the expectations are, set them up, pay them off in a misdirect. Take for instance, a simple pattern. Okay, let's say in this hypothetical movie that there is an evil ghost or whatever. Okay, and this ghost is going for revenge, it's killing people, whatever. It doesn't matter, it's a crappy example. So, throughout the movie, this hypothetical ghost has been knocking stuff off the table or whatever is close by to the victim. They knock 2 things off before killing them. This has happened twice. The third time, they knock 1 thing off, they knock 2 things off, they knock 3 things off, maybe they knock 4 things off. The audience has been caught off guard and suspense has been created. Now is the time to strike. Like a good joke, a good scare is all about unpredictability. Despite my inherent hate for the Paranormal Activity series, Part 3 actually has a very effective scene which uses this well. The scene is basically of the point of view shot from a camera that has been set up on one of those rotating fans. You know, one of those ones that swivels from left to right, one of those standing ones. You know what I'm talking about. The rhythm is based on the rotation of the fan. It goes from left to right, and when you're on the left, you can't see what's on the right side of the room. When you're on the right, you can't see what's on the left side of the room. This omission is really where the suspense is built. The audience is expecting at some point that from the left to the right, something's going to come up in the frame. Now, gimmick or not, this scene leaves the audience in kind of a haunting curiosity. You can't look away. The beauty of this scene though, and what really makes it sell, is how long it goes for. It goes for way too long. This extended shot keeps the audience in suspense. And just when you're starting to give up and think that maybe nothing's going to happen, something happens, and whether or not you think that it was worth the wait, the waiting is really what matters. The point of the rhythm and the point of jump scares is not the scare itself, it's the build-up, it's the setup, it's the waiting. And this scene did this very effectively. I still hate Paranormal Activity as a series though. More like Paranormal Craftivity. Right? Have you ever watched a horror movie trailer with no sound? It's nowhere near as effective. It's all in the sound. Score can often be one of the most overlooked aspects to a movie. Even by myself. Sometimes I forget to pay attention to that sort of thing. However, score can be one of the most powerful assets, especially when it comes to horror. Music can set the mood and establish expectation, and this allows misdirection. Something that we forget about movies a lot is that they're very collaborative pieces. Film is a combination, and music plays a big part. The sound effects go along with this. If the sound effects aren't up to scratch, if they don't sound realistic, if they're kind of silly, you're not going to believe it. Well-timed sound and score is essential. One of the movies that made me first pay attention to score in film in general is Insidious. Now, I was 14 at the time, and back then I was not into horror movies at all. I was a bit of a wimp. As soon as the opening credits began, it scared the hell out of me till the closing credits. The score in Insidious is one of the most effective scores I've ever heard in a movie. The music is haunting throughout, and it accompanies the film. It kind of intensifies the scenes when it needs to, but also holds back when it needs to. I don't know how you could listen to it and not just get like chills down your spine and not think it's the creepiest thing ever. The most important thing in movies, horror or not, is the characters and the story. Is your story interesting or original? If not, you better hope you have some damn charming leads. My point here is basically that you can have the scariest looking visuals, you can have the scariest looking monster, it doesn't matter though. In the end, if your story is not interesting, if your characters are boring, your movie will be boring. A bad film is a bad film. If your film was rushed through the writing process, if it has no direction, and if your characters are all one-note nobodies, nobody will care. Your film must have purpose and must be interesting. If the audience doesn't care, the film doesn't scare. What a good tagline. I came up with it. I swear. Maybe I read it somewhere. I think I came up with it though. Now there are many examples of this. What I'm talking about is 2015's The Visit. Throughout, it's an intriguing film that keeps you guessing and has you rooting for the characters. The protagonists in the film are children, so maybe it's a little manipulative, because you sympathize with kids, obviously. But The Visit manages to be creepy, mysterious, and darkly funny throughout. And because of this, the movie remains consistently interesting. The characters and the general premise have the audience absorbed, the audience cares. And because of this, the movie succeeds. In the end, film is an art form and there will always be new ways of telling a story. There will always be bad ones, and hopefully as well there will always be good ones. Let's just hope that we get some more of the good ones. So maybe let me know what you think of the movies that I mentioned. Let me know what you thought of this guide. And as I always say, subscribe to me if you want. You don't have to, you probably shouldn't. Also, I'm planning for this to be the first in a series. Next I was thinking about doing superhero movies because I'm fairly knowledgeable in that area.